Okay, so I'm just about to previous rig this character. So obviously this character is a little bit further. I haven't really been. I don't have like a simple model lying around just for previous. So I only have like these final ones, but it should be. It should be very much the same, and I can take this character and I can just kind of like simplify him quite a lot. But first of all, like what I want to do here is I just want to start out really start placing some bones. And if you guys have forgotten where this is, it's on the hold down space, skeleton, create joints. And I'm just going to click on that option box so I get this tool setting. If you don't see that, click the little hammer and the three dots here. And you can see all these things. Just hit reset on the tool so you're sure that you're on the same page. Hold down space out here and go into the right side view. And I'm just going to go in. I'm going to start building. And as you know me, I just like to kind of build on the side here. And I'm just going to go up to show and just make sure that I have joints hit on. And I'm just going to go like that. Every second is fine. I'm probably just going to keep it fairly simple, so we don't need to do like a whole lot of these. And as you remember, I always build them up in a straight line, and because if we set this to object, so if I hold down W and left mouse click at the same time, you get this menu, and then you can see I can set that to object. And you see like x-axis is actually pointing upwards. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about these things, but you can see the last joint is always pointing in a random direction, and that's not really what we want. We want them all to be oriented the same. So I'm just going to delete that last one, because then I know that the previous ones are correct. They're all the same. You can see the axis doesn't change. And what I mean by that, if I just undo just for a second here, you can see like the Y is pointing upwards, X is pointing upwards here. So I'm just going to delete that last one. And it's because the joints are orienting themselves based on the next joint, but because this one has no orient to joint after it, it doesn't know where to aim. So it's just kind of putting it into the world position that you have down here. That's Maya's world position. Great. So I'm going to take these here, and I'm just going to take 3 of them, and I'm going to drag them up. So I'll leave the first one. And I'm just going to go in here. I'm just going to set that approximately to the height of his body there, and go into the side view again, hit on this one here. So if X-ray joints, I'm sure it's underneath one of these here as well. If you can, just make sure that these ones are uncollapsed. So I'm going to hit X-ray joint, which means that I can see the joint through. And I'm just going to place that roughly there. So I'm thinking about where the leg is actually supposed to be bending from, and I think like bending from around here. So as you know, as I've explained before, is that if I go in here and I just hit this button here and I just go like that, what I do is if I always say like if I have a square here for the leg, I always try and do, you know, like a 90-degree angle for that, and that's in the middle here where I place my bone roughly. I want the bone to go straight through the leg, so roughly on that place. Cool. Well, in that case, I'm just going to delete that drawing, and that's explained. So the next thing I'll do is just go into my skeleton view, and then we're just going to say it was around here, and I'm just going to snap on the wireframe and do like that, do like this, and put that there and there. Cool. So I have that, and I'm just going to drag that out so it fits, and it's sort of like in that 90-degree angle that I kind of wanted it. And yeah, so that's good. Next up is the neck. Since this is just a super simple rig, I'm kind of just going to simplify everything quite a lot. So I'm probably just going to take this joint 4 here in the spine and drag that underneath joint 2 and then delete joint 3. So we just kind of have like something that's controlling this entire upper body, and just something from the actual lower part of the body. So now I have 3 joints for the spine, all my 5 joints for the legs. I kind of need all these, but for the spine here I need something simple. I'm going to duplicate the spine here, and I'm just going to move it upwards like that, and then I'm going to take the 2 top ones here and just pull them downwards like that, and then the last one here. And with that, the neck is kind of like the neck here on this guy is he's a little bit bent forward, so I kind of want to do something like that, but you know that I cannot have rotation values on my joints. So what I can do is if I hit Control A, underneath the joint here, you can see that there's something called preferred angles, joint orientation here, and you can see like if I again hold down E and left mouse click, you'll see I get the options for the rotate tool, because you can see like it changes W, E, R, if I put into E and I want to manipulate the way that this tool is working, like the way that this this tool is functioning, then I can hold down E and left mouse click to change that. And you'll see, like, if I hold down W and I do like that, the options are different, because it's for every single one of these that there is a different option. So if I hold down E, left mouse click, I can set this to object mode, and you can see, like, object mode is actually the green axis that's going this direction, and we know that X, Y, Z, we know that Y is green in Maya. So if I rotate this, you can see I'm actually starting to rotate that forward. And now I can just try and just move that around, so I can translate it, but I can't just rotate it. Alright, so I'm going to keep that roughly in the middle here. I'm just making sure I'm not placing the joints exactly on top of each other. It's important we don't snap joints to each other. Because when we hit skinning, if two joints are exactly on top of each other, the skinning will mess up. So we need to just make sure that there's an offset between these two. That's very important. Next up is I'm going to take this, what do you call it, the spine again. I'm going to duplicate that again, move it up here, and just make sure that I have that at the end of the neck. And then I'm just going to take the top part of this one and delete the final joint, which means that I have this here. So that will be my head rotation, right? Great. And remember, we just previous rigging, so we don't need to do like a whole lot of crazy things. But the next thing I will do, so I'm just keeping it super simple, right? I also kind of want to just take out maybe one joint. I don't need to be able to rotate my neck 2 places. So I can even take this joint 4 and just drop it onto joint 10. So these two, so now there's only like one rotation place for the neck, which is totally fine for us. So I have one rotation point here. I have one rotation point here. I have one for the upper part of the chest, and I have one for the lower part of the body here. So yeah, very simple. Next part, top view. And I'm just gonna hit save on this. Great. Next part is same thing as before. What we want to do is just create those joint placements for the for the beginning of the arm, for the middle of the arm, for the wrist, and then an end joint, just so we have that wrist here. And then we're going to build a clavicle. So first thing I'm going to start up with is I want to keep my joints here. So if I say skeleton again, and I just say like from this point, and we might move this a bit around, but I'm going to stay in the middle of the mesh here. So I'm going to stay there. And then for an elbow, I always say, like, you know, if you want to build a knuckle or an elbow or a knee, you always take the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds is that if this arm is equal to 1 length, then if I divide it into 3 parts, so like here, here, and here, I'm actually going to draw that up just to make, clarify that. And I don't like that color, so can I change it, please? For some reason, I can't even change the color I want. Maybe if I do like that. Okay, and that's really strange. I'm just going to try and delete this and just draw that up again. So what I'm saying is, if this arm here is 1 length, like let's say that this is equal to 1, then what I do is I take this and I divide it into 3 pieces, so 3 equal size, and I say like this is where these are the 2/3, and this is the 1/3, right? So this is where I want my position of my bone. Keep that in mind. That'll give you like a really nice bend on your elbows. So like simple things, and you might think like, oh, that's not so important for previous, but I'll actually argue that joint placement is really important when you're doing these things. And then you can see one thing that I did here that I don't really like is that this here actually has a bend to it, and I don't want that. So what I'll do is I'll just hold down V, and if I hold down V while I'm snapping this upwards, I can actually, if I hold, I hold down V and I click on this axis and I just drag it upwards, you can see it snaps here, and I went into the, isolate mode by selecting this one and hitting Control 1. So I snap that up there, so it snaps into the same position, but you can see that this joint is actually still pointing in that direction. So I'm just going to try and see what happens if I do like that. Not like that. I just want to get in here. And for this, I should be able to yeah, I just want to make sure that I do this in a logical way. So for this here, what I will do is I'll just freeze the rotation, and that should actually, let's see if that actually helps us. Freeze rotation. And of course it didn't. Let's just make sure that we get this right. So we know that it's 8 point this, so I'm just going to zero that out, and I'm going to drop that in here. So I'm actually putting it into the actual rotation and not into the joint orientation. So what happens now if I say freeze now on the, you can see that the rotation is here. So I can just say freeze that, rotate. Cool. And for some reason, okay, I'm messing this up. I'm just gonna make it easier. Forget about that, guys. Sorry. Let's just make sure we get this right. It's so rare that I do these things manually, and I'm not gonna say so you can see like what happens when I took it out of the hierarchy here. It did something really strange, and I'm just gonna take that off there like that. So basically you can see like the way that a joint is positioning itself, if it doesn't have any rotation values, you can sort of like just place it, you know. And you can see like if I place it somewhere random, it gives me these coordinates, and these coordinates are accordingly to this position, right? So if I now said that it was up here, if I reset this, for instance, it's probably going to jump over here, but I don't want to do that. But if I reset this one, that's the position of where I want the hand, and you can see it's now pointing in that direction. But I think that might have been a bit too confusing, so what I'll just suggest you guys to do, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we have our arm, and I'm just going to rebuild that for just 1 second so everybody understands that. So I'm just going to go in here, and I'm just going to delete this arm and do that in a really easier way. So forgive me for that. Let's go like this, and I'm just going to place that out here somewhere. And I don't want you guys to get nervous if this one doesn't fit quite perfectly. It's only if we're building the FK arms, which we're not doing for the PREVIS rig. And it's because we're placing our IK arms in world position anyways that it's okay. I'll get back to that in a moment. So just place your arms there. Don't worry that the hand is not pointing like this. I'd rather just have it in one plane, because the only rotation point that's important is this one, right? So what I'll probably argue is that you could pull this a little bit backwards like that, just to have that in the position of the wrist. And we're keeping to the rule of thirds, and we're just checking out like if I want to put it here. What I can do, if I want to move a joint that's in the position here and I don't want to move it like this because then I move everything else, then I can hold down D and you can actually move these. So on a regular object you would be able to move the actual pivot point, but because joints don't have pivot points that are not in their actual position, you can actually move that position around. So something like that should be good. Cool. Next thing I'll do now is I'll probably just rename some of these things. So I'll just hit save here, and that's good. And I'm just going to start renaming. So I'm just going to call this L arm. And I used a AJA naming convention. Sorry, I have a wire that's in the way. There we go. And I'm going to call that AJB, C, and end. And this is my head. M for middle. Great. Neck. Cool. And let's see what's got. Okay, so that's the leg. Cool. And this was the spine. Cool, and there we go. So that's great. So I'm just gonna close off all these hierarchies. Cool, and take off that wireframe for a second. So this is basically where you should be now. So the next thing I'll do here is I'll just take this leg here and I'll just say skeleton, mirror, joints, and put that to. And I took the option box. You'll notice that I always go for the option box almost all the time. I just always want to check that things are. I never like one thing that I really want to emphasize is that I don't assume a lot of things. Basically because there are so many options and assumptions kind of always seems to fail. So I always do a fair amount of checks unless I'm scripting it. So I'm just going to hit there and then, apply. And then that's going to give me the other leg here. The next thing I'll do is the L arm. Do the same. Okay, great. And then now that the arms are placed, I just forgot that I need a clavicle here. And I also need to build some fingers. But I think for the fingers, we're going to do something like that's a little bit more simple. So so we all have a chance of kind of like moving these fingers around. I think we're just going to build the three fingers here as one bone, then the index finger as a bone on its own, and then the thumb as a bone. So we're just going to build 3 fingers instead of 5. And so with this one, I'm just going to call that L clavicle. And we're just gonna take that there, and great, cool, and then hit apply on that. So now I have the left and right side on this, and that's great, cool. And let's see, yeah, let's do these fingers quickly. So I'm just gonna go in here, and as I said, I'm gonna build these 3 fingers as one bone, and then this one as its own, and then the thumb as its own. So I'm just gonna go say skeleton. And we're just going to try and build the first one here. So again, rule of thirds as I'm placing them, but I just want to make sure that we get the knuckles here. And I could actually have been a little bit better at giving it a more correct wireframe for these ones. If I was building this as a final model again, I would probably add in something like that in the middle here. So it would actually have a little bit more options to bend better, but for now this will be just fine. Just gonna drag that upwards, and inside this front view here, so I kind of placed it like roughly where I wanted it. So I'm just gonna think about those rules of thirds again. Keep in mind that I don't really want to translate this around, because you know when you have a bone it should only have one translate value. If it's the second bone, the first one can, of course, that's placed in world space, but this one is measuring itself based on the previous bone's position. So what I'll do here is instead of rotating and translating, I'm probably going to do something like, you know, just pulling this one in, and I hold down control while I'm doing this, because then it's only moving in one axis. So you can see, like, I just click out here in this value here, hold down control, and then I can drag here. And then if I go down here to the first bone and I just want to rotate that a little bit, so I'm just gonna rotate that downwards a little bit like that. And if I rotated it here in the joint orientation, I'm not getting rotations on my bones. And then the next thing I'll do here is just rotate this one down a little bit. And I could take this one and translate it out a little bit. So keep in mind I'm holding down control as I'm doing these things. Cool. So I'm actually all right with these. I think I'm going to pull that down a little bit. Great. And I'm going to call this L index AJ JNT. Cool. And I'm just going to take this hierarchy, I'm just going to drag that over to this finger here. I think that's pretty much the same. Yeah, since it's previous, I don't really care too much. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to say modify, search and replace names. So where do we have that? I think I've done the display there, modify, search and replace names. And I'm going to look for index. And I'm going to call this finger, because I haven't really specified which specific finger that is. And then we're going to take this, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky placing that thumb, but we're going to do it fairly fast, just to, we don't really want to spend too much time. And I'm going to go against my rule, but because we're in previous, and I'm going to rotate the joint chain here, but we're in previous, so I'm going to live with it. So I'm going to rotate that like this. I'm going to rotate it down like that. And then I'm going to make sure that what I really want is I just want to check out this finger and see like where is it actually bending. Like it's bending down this way, right? So I want to make sure it does like that. That should be okay. So I'm just going to try and follow the model here a little bit. And then I'm just going to quickly look into like where are these. Make sure that you're in the object mode when you're doing this. But I'm just going to drag that down because I want the bend of the thumb to happen in the right position. So the thumb kind of starts up here, here, and here. So we're just going to take this one here and drag it down a little bit. Great. Sweet. And yeah, we're going to keep it there. So the next thing I'll do is I'll just try and see what happens if I freeze these. So I freeze rotate only. And that means that all the rotations are actually landing down here in this joint orient. And we should see if I select these things here. Okay, so one thing that I'm noticing here is basically that my rotate, you can see that Y is actually rotating this one forward, and over here it's actually Z that's rotating forward. So what I'll want you to do is just twist this until the X or Z axis is actually doing this, and then we're just going to make that Z axis the one that's rotating forward, and then I'm going to try and freeze these again and see what if that actually holds up, and it does. So that's fine. So what we'll do here is just select all of these, and basically I'm just trying to make sure of this so there's a consistency when the animators are animating, that that the fingers are actually bending in the right order. And then we're going to rename this, so modify search and replace names from index to thumb. Great, hit save. And then what I'll do now is I'll take these 3 fingers here and just drop them underneath that hand joint here. So now that's good, and we can take this L arm here and just drop it underneath the end joint of the clavicle. So you can see like how I'm slowly just trying to make this into one big hierarchy. So take this end joint here, drop it underneath this, the start joint of the arm, drop it underneath the end joint. There we go. And take these 2 here and drop them underneath this one here. So now the arms are following along. Good. I would actually argue that in most cases, if your character is just walking around or all this stuff, you could get away with just making FK arms. But since FK is so easy, you just create a controller and then control each individual joint. I'm not going to go through how to do that, because we're going to do it for the fingers. I'm going to make IK arms. The next thing I'll do is take the neck here and drop that underneath the end of the spine. And like the reason why I build them one by one, and the reason why I'm not just putting this joint underneath this one here and deleting this so the neck is actually directly underneath, it's just for clarity, like it's just so we can actually see or have individual pieces that are sort of like blocked out to work for us individually. So this is what we call modular rigging, that I'm kind of like taking care, okay, that's the head, that's the neck, that's the spine, that's the clavicle, that's the arm. So they kind of like all separate out. So I'm just going to take the 2 legs here and drop them underneath this one here. But there is one thing that I want to make sure that we do here, because I was just about to put my legs underneath my spine, but we know that I want the rotation of the spine. When I rotate that spine, I don't want my legs to go upwards, and they will in this case. So what I'll do is I'll just create like another joint. So I'm just going to duplicate this spine here. I'm just going to call this so I deleted everything underneath that. Now I just have a joint that's lying here, and I'm going to select my 2 legs and hit Control 1 to isolate. And then I'm just going to go in here, I'm going to fiddle this around. So I'm going to, just like before, I'm going to hold down V for, I don't know, Victor. And then I'm just going to snap that into the position of being exactly in the middle of the 2 joints, right? And then I'm going to call this one for, let's call this one for center. I can't remember what we called it in the other lectures, but it's the same idea that we have something where the legs are rotating from, and it's sort of like the root of the spine as well. So we can take this one and actually just move that up, so I can hold down D and just move this upwards a little bit. So I move it up in that same position, right? Great. And then I'm just gonna parent that underneath this one here. Cool. So we basically have like, don't worry if you have like a value here like I do, it's okay. It's just moving it back and forth. I wouldn't, if you can see like what happens when I do this now, it's actually moving the entire rig, and that's definitely not what we want to do. So now that I have this position thing here, then that's a problem for me. It's not major, but it would be nice not to have it. So what I'll do is I'll just try and go in here. I'm just going to move that spine B, because you can see it's all zeroed out. And I'm going to take this here and I'm going to just zero out that one there and just drop this spine B underneath it again. Yeah, of course. So we're just going to keep this here, because the reason why I have it is basically because this one has a new parent object that's here, but we don't care about the fact that this bone here is not pointing directly up to that spine joint here. So I'm just going to take this one down and keep that there, and don't worry about the root of the spine. Like the spine AJA can have two, because it is technically a root joint. It'll be the same thing as the arm has multiple translates, because it's a root joint. It doesn't fit to that clavicle end, right? Same thing with the head. Every time a new module starts, you know, the start of the module object will always have multiple translates and rotates, unless that object is of course placed right in the center of the world. So you can see, even though the legs they will probably be a little bit different, but you can see like if I move them like this, it's because they're basically only raised above here. Hopefully that makes sense. Also, if I take the roots of the fingers and all this stuff. Anyways, so now I have like one big bone hierarchy, and I basically just need to take this one here. So I'm just going to select all the roots of the fingers here, and I'm quickly just going to shift P to unparent that, because what I need to do is mirror it. And I know that I'm going fairly fast, but I'm going to stop recording in just a second once we've placed all the bones. I just wanted to get through the basics here. I think one last thing we should do, because it's PREVIS, we just need to create like a jaw maybe. I don't know, like should we make a jaw? Yeah, I think a jaw joint would just be pretty good, and then we're just gonna do the eyes with blend shapes. Create a jaw. We can do it the Pixar way, kind of. We just do something like that. Pixar keeps their jaw a little bit lower, to have this sort of like flat movement. It's also making sure that you can translate that jaw at some point. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to say M jaw AJNT and end. Great. Okay, and I'm going to take that jaw and I'm going to drop that underneath the head joint. Okay, guys, so if you made it this far, then that's perfect. And I will see you in the next video. We're just going to do all the controllers. And then in the lecture after that, we're going to do the skinning, and that's it. So 3 major lectures, or 3 kind of big lectures, but just taking you through like the overall building of the biped rig for prevising.